When the ISS project was first conjured into being in the 1990s, every member state was to provide their own resupply spacecraft. Originally, this meant the Russians would provide the Progress spacecraft, the Europeans the ATV, the Americans the Space Shuttle, and the Japanese the HTV. The HTV was originally supposed to launch in 2001 on the H-IIB 212, which itself is it's a crazy rocket, and I absolutely love it. However, it was considered a bit too Kerbal, and so it was replaced with the H-IIB, which is far more sane, but also far more boring. The main launch was delayed by 8 years, probably due to the need to develop a new rocket. On September the 10th, 2009, it was finally launched. In recent years, JAXA has been working hard on making their space program a lot cheaper. And so they've worked hard on developing the H3 rocket, and they've also been working on a new spacecraft, the HTV-X. It's faced some delays, but it's slated to launch very soon. I'm May Aikuni, and today I want to talk about the brand new HTV-X spacecraft and what it brings to the table. As it stands, the HTV is the only spacecraft capable of carrying the International Standard Payload racks, which align the walls of all the laboratory modules on the ISS. Or at least, the American side. The Space Shuttle used to be able to transport these as well, but that hasn't gone to space in a while. The hatches on the other spacecraft, like the Cygnus and the Cargo Dragon, are just too small. With only the HTV having this capability, it is absolutely vital for performing experiments aboard the ISS. Unfortunately, the HTV is very expensive, not helped by the fact that it required the H-IIB, which was only ever used for the HTV. This in clear violation of Akin's 39th Law of Spacecraft Design, stating that there are 3 keys to keeping a new space program affordable and on schedule. That being 1. No new launch vehicles, 2. No new launch vehicles, and 3. Whatever you do, don't develop any new launch vehicles. For the HTV-X, the next version of the spacecraft, they decided to not only upgrade the spacecraft, but also to just use the H3 rocket. Just have one rocket to rule them all. The most obvious change to the HTV-X is the layout. The service module, which on the HTV is placed in the bottom, is now in the middle of the spacecraft. The HTV-X will not have any main engines and will instead rely on RCS thrusters for all maneuvering. Where the HTV had these thrusters all over the spacecraft, the HTV-X will only have a few of them on the service module. Not only shaving off a lot of weight, but also making it a lot simpler to develop and construct. The HTV-X will use fewer batteries than the HTV, but they can actually be recharged. They added solar panels that can be extended and aim to capture more sunlight. The HTV, the unpressurized section, was in the middle. That just made the most sense given that they needed to put the engines somewhere. But this limits the payload volume and adds a lot of dead weight. So for the HTV-X they said, to hell with it. Put it on the top of the spacecraft and just maximize the use you can get out of it. The spacecraft isn't just cheaper either. Where the HTV needed 18 weeks from arrival at Tanegashima to launch, the HTV-X can be assembled and ready to go in just 6 weeks, a third of what it used to be. Not only does this save a lot of time, it provides more freedom and frees up man hours, thus saving money. Last minute loading may also happen up to 24 hours before the launch, allowing the spacecraft to be loaded with extra fresh food. Now we've seen why the spacecraft is cheaper and faster. It's important to mention that these savings weren't for naught. Where the HTV could carry 3 tons pressurized and 1 ton unpressurized, the HTV-X can carry 4 tons pressurized and 1.7 tons unpressurized. That's almost 2 tons or 50% more! And just to top it all off, the HTV-X has a really cool feature that makes it even more useful. Where the HTV will yeet straight into the atmosphere, the HTV-X, after undocking from the space station, will remain in orbit for another 18 months and operate completely independently, where it can launch CubeSats and perform experiments. Now I do think that deserves the title of coolest unmanned ISS resupply spacecraft, but it gets even cooler, and I wish I had official renders, but instead Kerbal Space Program will do. The HTV requires the use of a Canadarm for berthing with the ISS, and the HTV-X won't be much different. On the second HTV-X mission, the HTV-X2, they will attempt to autonomously dock to the ISS using a NASA docking system attached to the unpressurized end of the HTV-X. This is the same docking hardware used to dock the Crew Dragon with the ISS. I don't think they'll be using this for actual missions to the ISS, if for no other reason than International Standard Payload Racks. You know, the ones that made the HTV absolutely indispensable? Yeah, they don't fit through the NASA docking system. So then, why? Well, not too far into the future, there will be a space station that almost exclusively makes use of the NDS, the Lunar Gateway. Well, that's right, they're planning to send this bad boy to the moon. The HTV-XG, G for Gateway I guess, will probably replace the common berthing mechanism with the NDS. As a gateway won't always be manned, it will need to dock autonomously, something which the common berthing mechanism simply cannot do. Hence the name. It is not clear what other upgrades will be performed to the HTV-X to make it moon ready. Now you might be wondering how they're going to get the HTV-XG to the Lunar Gateway. For this, I'll show a lovely recreation in KSP. The first few missions will use 2 H3 launches. One will launch the HTV-XG, and the other will launch the transfer stage. You'll be shocked to see what it looks like. Here he comes. Ta-da! It's just a docking port. They're planning on just using the second stage to launch the HTV-XG to the moon. Why not? It works. For later missions, they're planning to make use of the H3 Heavy instead, which is simply H3 with 2 liquid side boosters. This should be powerful enough to launch the HTV-XG straight into a translunar orbit. They may also make use of the H3 Heavy to launch lunar landers in the future, but that's all speculation. Regardless of plans for the Gateway, the HTV-X was originally supposed to be launched in 2021, but with the delay of H3, that's not happening. It's still scheduled for fiscal year of 2022, which runs until March 31st, 2023, as far as I can tell at least. I don't see why it can't, to be fair, but I wouldn't be surprised if this gets delayed by a few months. The pressurized section of the HTV-X has already arrived at Tanegashima Space Center, so who knows? No matter what happens, I'm hyped, and I can't wait for this amazing spacecraft. And when it inevitably happens, I will be right here on this channel to cover the launch, so subscribe to catch it when it happens. Until then, I'll see you next time.